Hi everybody, Good Buddy Kyo here. Sorry for the nervousness. I'm just not really used to this. And I'm not really sure how to go about this. I know it's sort of out of the blue, but I want to at least put what happened out there for other Hetalia fans like myself. I guess I'll just talk. For as much of an interesting experience this was, I'd rather quickly forget about it and go on living my peaceful, derpy life. Alright, so this happened a while ago, before school started. But I should probably go back even further than that. Back to when Hetalia Access Powers was in full swing. The second season was still bounding through the fandom and giving out glorious new episodes every Monday. My sister and I were both very involved in the series, which was a rare occasion since she often didn't share interests with me. Typically, I would force myself to get into whatever she was getting into, so we could at least have a reason to hang out. But this was the first time she came into my fandom without me working for it. And it was really, really nice. And considering it was still unknown in our small town, it was even better to have someone to relate to. She and I would cosplay together, watch episodes together, and get merchandise together. You know, the whole kit and caboodle. However, she was always able to get more stuff than I was because she actually had a job. At some point, she bought a bootleg DVD of Hetalia so she could be able to watch it at any time. I've provided the picture of it here, thanks to my mother for letting me borrow her camera for a second before she sold it. Of course, all the episodes were just ripped from internet sites, ones that had them subbed. I watched 1 or 2 episodes with her, but honestly, I was content with watching them online, so I left her to it. About 2 or 3 days later, after she got the DVD, she acted really, well, weird is the best way I can describe it. In the drop of a hat, she dropped the whole Hetalia series, setting aside her merchandise, shelving her cosplays, even selling some of them. When I tried to ask her about what was up, she just said she didn't want to talk about it, to the point that she would glare at me if I mentioned it to her. I was extremely disappointed at losing my sister when it came to sibling bonding, and the fandom at the time. I just figured she grew out of it, or found something better. That mindset especially began to fit in when she started to read Homestuck soon after it, just to have something to do. Now, here's where it got even weirder. Now, it's been a while since then, probably like a month or so, and I'm not sure why. It was probably a phone call from my best friend or something, but I got the urge to watch some episodes with some classic, good old Italy. Though at the time, my internet was being worked on by my father since he was switching phone providers and all that mess. So to make up for it, I decided to look for that Hetalia DVD that my sister had. It took me a while to find it, but when I did, found it shoved in the back of the DVD cabinet. I'm not sure why exactly she shoved it back there. Well, at the time, I didn't. The bootleg wasn't that bad, really. The cover was just fan art of everyone as chibis around the world, with the title on top. Same went for the disc. Just printed on fan art. I popped the DVD in the player in my room and decided to look through the episodes to find a really fun one. Maybe the one where Romano was first introduced. As I went through the episode choice list, though, I found something really weird in between episode 23 and episode 24. For those of you who don't know, it's the Liechtenstein in Switzerland episodes. Very cute indeed. And the 24th episode had the conclusion of the Axis on an Island arc thing. It was another square choice, like an episode. But there really wasn't a title next to it saying what number it was or what the episode was about. But that wasn't... No, it wasn't that. It was Untitled that caught my interest. But rather, the screenshot of it. It was of Italy smiling, looking upward in a content daze. His eyes actually opened, with glistening eyes in what looked like sand behind him. Like, perhaps he was laying on it? Now this blew my friggin' mind, for this was something new. And I craved for new things like this in a fandom, always. Perhaps this was a hidden chapter I wasn't aware of, like a bonus episode. I bit my lip and trembled with excitement, and I knew that I had this all to myself. I mean, wait until my friends heard about this. I was going to be more knowledgeable than anyone else. Of course, when I look back, I wish that I wouldn't have found it. Without much ado, I clicked the select button on my remote to watch it. The title animation appeared as always, the large orchestra blaring out for a few seconds to show the Japanese katakana of Hetalia, with Axis powers next to it. Soon after, it shifted to the view of the island that the Axis were stranded on, Japan and Germany sitting against the shade of a tree, while Italy just laid in the sand, soaking up the sun with the cute dumb look on his face. Now, before I go on, I should elaborate that I've read stories like this before, about lost episodes of cartoons, stories that I didn't believe in until now, honestly. And I know how they went off about it being an extremely bad quality. But this actually wasn't too bad. Sure, it wasn't the best quality, it was still quite pixely from being ripped off a site and then burned onto a disc, but it was okay. The sound just a tad muffled. Nothing too out of the extreme. Of course, this just kind of made it creepier later on when it was actually able to be seen better. But I'll get on that in a bit. Back to the episode. When Italy was sunbathing in his jacket and shorts, the camera cut over to Germany and Japan. Though they both looked a tad upset, if not a bit worried. And that's when they started to speak. Two things threw me off. One, there were no subtitles, so I had zero idea of what they were talking about. And two, their voices were actually those who voiced them in the series. I was extremely impressed of such raw footage, though I was a bit, well, miffed that there were no subtitles. Oh well, as long as Germany's Seiyu Hiroki Yasumoto kept talking, I was happy all the way. The two seemed to be chatting about something serious. Germany clutching his stomach from time to time in pain, as Japan would nod and set a hand on his stomach as well. My guess was that they had run out of steady food on the island, so they were starving. That was kind of a downer to start the episode on, but it was only the beginning. There was probably a fun way to get food later on. Just then, Italy had called out, having the two of them look up to where he was, which was now currently running around in the ocean. He waved back to them, and the two of them waved back unenthusiastically before the other went back to just playing in the sun and water. Now, I didn't notice this until then, but the only thing playing in the background was this sort of ocean's waves. Something not uncommon, but it certainly kept the atmosphere kind of stoic, especially when the focus was to the hungry and worried nations in the shade. But either way, I was too sucked up in just the beautiful new material that I didn't question it. I didn't even care that I didn't know the bulk of it. I mostly cared for the actions anyway. The nations were quiet for a while, before Japan seemed to ask something. And Germany looked to him in shock, almost exclaiming before being quietly hushed by the island nation, making him whisper the line instead. Ooh, what was Japan thinking? I thought. But Japan had repeated the Japanese statement in a more quiet and clear tone, not taking his eyes off Italy in the water. For a few moments, the two of them discussed the issue, obviously talking about the Italian. Though, soon enough, the two of them nodded in agreement. At that moment, even though it was just for a few seconds, Germany had made the saddest face I had ever seen. Like he could burst out into tears at any moment but kept it back. Honestly, I inwardly flipped my shit at such emotion, even if it was short. Though it made me wonder even more what brought it on. The scene changed to nighttime, the three nations huddled around the fire for warmth, though they seemed at least content with their jackets on, being near the warmth. As usual, Italy was fast asleep next to it, sleeping contently before leaving the other two nations to their thoughts. And still, only the sound of the oceans crashing against the shore was heard in the background as the two were silent. Though, soon enough, the camera panned over them, giving each other a subtle nod. In unison, the two stood up, going over to Italy and picking him up very carefully, as if not wanting to wake him up. At this point, I was extremely confused. What were they planning to do to him? Were they going to a new location? Quietly, they shuffled the sleeping nation over to the ocean. And carefully set him in, face down. Japan setting his hands over the other's head so to keep it still below the water's surface. It didn't take long until Italy began to thrash around, bubbles popping furiously on the water next to his head, only having Japan press down harder while Germany was looking away with his eyes closed and lips being bitten into hard. While this was going on, my mouth was just hanging ajar. Japan and Germany were drowning Italy? Why? Just why? As I just watched this insanity, I recognized the words "Gomen, Hetalia," coming from Japan. Sorry, Italy? What the hell? About 15 seconds later, which felt like almost forever of watching the poor nation, Italy's limbs fell with a plop in the water, the bubbles ceasing to rise anymore. The deed was done. But why? Why? Germany and Japan picked up the waterlogged Italy and brought him back to shore, placing him down next to the fire. While Germany sat aside, just staring at the fire as if contemplating what they just did, Japan unsheathed his sword and kneeled down next to the corpse. Taking off his own jacket and setting it aside. With one more look to the blonde before moving back down, Japan took a deep breath before making an incision from the base of his neck all the way down to his belly button, cutting in a bit more so he was able to... Oh God. So he was able to flip the skin back to reveal the bloody organs of the once living nation. At this, I had to pause the episode, feeling quite lightheaded at this. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, I've watched and played Hetaoni. I've read and looked at gory Hetalia stuff before. But seeing it done in Studio Dean style, and done in official voices, or, well, if it's a fake, it's a really good artist, and very good sound-alikes. It was just way too surreal for me. And while I had the TV paused, I had a good chance to look at Italy's insides. God, that sounds so fucking weird as I type this. They looked so real. Not that they were hyper-cammed or anything, but it was as if the artist had stared at the inside anatomy of a person for hours, drawing every little curve and crease to make it realistic. I wanted to stop watching. I wanted to just turn it off and abandon that TV with the DVD inside. But I was already too far in. I had to see this through to the end. It would haunt me for the rest of my life if I stopped here. After taking a short breather, drinking some water, I pressed play on the remote to resume the madness. Instantly, I was greeted by a slurp sound of Japan sliding his hand into Italy's body and pulling out one of the organs out of place. It was possibly the liver. With it being so detailed, it was hard not to mistake the organ. Japan sighed as he cut off the connecting strand with his sword and set the mess of an organ onto the other's discarded jacket before going back in and setting aside both of the kidneys. While Japan searched around, Japan reached over to some sharpened sticks he seemed to have gathered earlier and penetrated the sharp end through each organ that Japan had laid out. With a saddened sigh, he set the, I don't even know how to describe it, organ kebabs on a range on the fire so it could get cooked, which I didn't even know how that was even possible. Once more, after a seemingly long period of time, Germany pulled the now cooked liver from the fire while handing Japan a kidney, who accepted it with his arms still blood-smeared. Both of them were in silence. Before Japan finally muttered, "Itadakimasu," and both took a large bite from it. God, it still makes me feel weird when I think about seeing that scene. But the lightheadedness that I felt faded away as I heard something that made me gasp. Doitsu? Nihon? Both of them turned in shock. The camera panning over to show that Italy was awake. What? I mean, how was he awake? They drowned him. Or was he just unconscious? Hell, I wasn't even sure what was going on, and it seemed like the other two had no idea either. Germany and Japan tried to explain themselves, but Italy began to grow more panicked, slowly getting what was happening, and he began to scream. Scream in pain, scream in fear, scream in sadness. I couldn't even pinpoint what emotion was there. But it was so weird to hear him like that. It almost sounded like the man voicing him was in a large amount of pain himself. Germany and Japan went over to him, trying to get him to be quiet. Though after the large confusion of everyone yelling at once, Germany was the one to finally scream for everyone to be quiet. Shaking Italy to try to make him quiet, resulting to just tugging the curl on his hair to make him stop momentarily. At this point, where I should have laughed, I was practically at the point of tears. Germany talked, trying to appear strong, and tried to explain their situation. My guess of the situation was there was no food left, so they were going to eat Italy since he was the weakest. But he was a nation, right? They were all nations. Why did they have to resort to that? Wait. Was that why Italy woke up? Soon enough, Italy gave an understanding nod, whimpering in pain and fear as well. He sputtered out something, pausing at a point to cough, blood drooling down his chin. Now, it was Japan's turn to talk, seeming to try to comfort him in a soothing tone. After his small speech, Italy nodded once more before looking down, seeing that Germany was gripping his hand tightly. With another nod from the German and Japanese nations, Japan went back over and scooped his hand into the now somewhat functioning body, pulling and cutting out his spleen, setting it aside. Italy almost screamed, reduced to a sort of mixture of whimpering and sobbing. The camera cut to a view of his and Germany's hands becoming more constricted against each other. The shot panned up to a frowning Germany, who once glanced at Japan's work before speaking again, calling Italy's attention. He spoke for a bit, trying to smile. And soon, Italy smiled back at him, for once in the series actually opening his eyes to reveal their golden honey color, and called him the familiar word he used to call him: Captain. Then there was a time skip of sorts. Soon, a large portion of organs lying on Italy's jacket. Things I could recognize being intestines, a pancreas, the bladder, practically everything but the brain, lungs, and heart. Japan wiped an arm to his forehead, smearing it with blood accidentally before impaling them on sticks and sticking them near the fire. He turned back to Germany, who was still holding Italy's hand. He crawled over to get a closer look. Italy seemed to have passed on again. His eyes lightly glistening and staring blankly upwards with a small smile on his face. This was the shot, the very shot shown in the menu. Japan looked up to Germany. Seeing that he was frowning, blue eyes glistening with tears as he still tried to get over having this happen to him. Japan set a hand on his shoulder, murmuring something seemingly comforting, making Germany nod in agreement and sigh shakily. Japan frowned lightly at this before he moved aside, grabbing the dead Italian's free hand and squeezing it lightly, saying something to Germany before looking to the fire where the organs were roasting. Germany glanced back to the fire for a moment before he looked up to the sky where Italy was staring. The camera panning up towards it, past the stars and everything until it was completely black. And then the next episode started playing. Just like that, no credits or anything. Just left the episode on a cryptic or optimistic note. I have no idea. I wish I could have it run on my computer to get screenshots, but the disc refuses to play on here. Though, my friend Fia was kind enough to get 2 screenshots for me. Though the disc only worked on her computer for so long. That, and I don't really have a good camera to snap a clear picture anymore. You know, since my mom sold the only camera that we had. But even so, even if I had a good camera, I'd rather not look at that again. It may not sound as bad when you read this, but that made me get away from Hetalia for a while, honestly. I'm not as weak in the stomach as my sister, because I still love the series, and I will continue to love it. But since then, I refuse to watch any of the anime's episodes. And even now, I would prefer to see fan-made gore over official gore anytime in any anime. Thank you to all my $9 patrons for supporting this video. Aiden S. 2014, Alexander Lee, Angelic Panda, Ursulan Falati, Urisville, Brantley Wiggard, Chief, D4C, Darts Z, Declan Benoln, Delboy, Draco, Dragonblood Fire X, Ellison Wilson, Araviv, Evil Doer, Phelanil W. 2011, Frank, Gavin, Isaac Coria, Jace, Joel Climaco, Jonessi, Cade, Lawbringer DK, Lex, Liam Hughes, Lone Survivor 3, Man of Many Bees, Mark Mason, Maxwell Lukier, Nick Capone, PDP, Patrick Jan Joshua Davidson, Poyup, Prism, Prototype number 13, Sean Malcolm, Sleepy Sloth, Sneedly Chuck, Sonrox, Thoughty Dahati, Tommy, Uriel Herrera, Will, XX Antitrix Never Sorry 17XX, Zach Hale, and Zivis01. Thank you all so much for being able to make these videos possible. It really means the world and more to me that you guys support me the way that you do. If any of you would like to support me out there, I'll leave the links to my social media down below. There you can find both my Ko-Fi and my Patreon. That way, if you want to make a one-time donation, you can, and if you want to continue to support me full-time, you can also. Thank you all again so much for listening to today's audio or watching today's video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!